Do you want to make the most of your internship or externship to maximize your possibility of getting a job? Well, let me give you some of my top tips, the do's and don'ts of internships and externships, and make sure you stick around till the end because I'm going to give you a couple of resources that I know about on how to find an internship. Hey everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, and content creator, and on my channel I provide tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you be successful in a medical coding career. If you haven't already, I'd highly encourage you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can get alerts when I post new episodes. I'm going to use internship and externship kind of interchangeably. I know there are technically differences between them, and I actually had to Google what they are. Apparently, externships are shorter term. They're more commonly not paid versus internships, which sometimes can be paid, and they are longer term, more hands-on learning job tasks. I personally am someone who was hired off of an internship, so I do encourage you, if you are offered an internship, to take it. I know not everyone has the opportunity, or maybe it doesn't fit in their lifestyle, or they already have other pertinent experience elsewhere, but there is some statistical proof that internships can increase your opportunity of landing a job because they show that you have some hands-on experience. So let's cover the do's and don'ts of externships. And I say this as someone who has completed internships. I've taught classes where students have completed internships. I have helped people complete their capstones for AHIMA when I was working as a coding supervisor. So I have a very well-rounded view of internships and externships because I have lots of different insights from them, from someone who's personally done them, from someone who's coordinated students that have done them, and for someone who has personally coordinated the capstones and internships, externships of other medical coding students. I think for the purposes of this video, so we don't get confused, I'm going to use the term externship, but understand that this will also apply to internships as well. One of the first top do's, and this applies to a lot of things, is to have some set goals. When you're learning medical billing, coding, health information, there's a lot of terms that you hear in your books that you may see screenshots of, but it's good to see them actually working firsthand. So you might want to set a list of different goals of tasks that you would like to see and see if they can accommodate you at least shadowing some people that work with those. So if you hear a term like charge scrubber and you need to visualize that and you want to get some firsthand experience seeing how they work, ask if you can shadow someone for a little while that works those charge scrubber edits. And that way you can get some visualization of how they work. And it will actually help out the person who's helping coordinate your internship or externship because sometimes they don't always know exactly what to do with you. So if you come in with a list and say, hey, I want to see a charge scrubber, I want to see an encoder, I want to see how a medical record is generated, even something like maybe just put it on there and say, hey, I'd like to shadow a provider for a little while and see how they generate their documentation and their bill. And maybe they'll accommodate you, maybe they can't, but you won't know unless you actually put that down and ask them. When I used to work plastic surgery, one of my big goals is I wanted to go into the operating room and see one of the surgeries. There was another coder there that had been there for a long time and worked neurosurgery, and she got to see some of her neurosurgery procedures that were done by her providers. At that facility, I was adamantly told absolutely not. No coders are ever, for any circumstances, allowed in the surgical operating room. But I didn't let that discourage me. When I moved on to a new organization in a higher role, I asked them, hey, I've worked plastic surgery for a long time and I would love to go in and shadow in the operating room. And they said, yeah, we can absolutely do that. Here's the person you contact and here's the paperwork you fill out. It was a really cool experience that I got to see a tissue expander exchange right before I was going out to nationals in Vegas to talk about how to code those types of procedures. And it helped unlock some of those mysteries of the operating room, like how you have to collect your scrubs and put them on and then be permitted to get special entry into the OR. And speaking of things like scrubs, one of my next do's is to ask about attire. I have seen a couple of schools that just because you're a healthcare student, they'll have you wear scrubs, but that might not be appropriate for the department in which you are going to be externing. In some private practice, they might say, hey, scrubs are fine, but most of the organizations I've seen, insurance companies, healthcare organizations, hospitals, billing offices, they want business casual. And don't just assume what the attire is based off of maybe a person you initially interviewed with, because it could have been dress down day. It could be that that person has had lots of different violations, or everyone is just aghast by what they wear. In most cases, you can't go wrong with simple tops and slacks or skirts, but you never know. They could be putting you in with the C-suite executives for a short period of time and kind of want you to wear a blazer. And even if you're going to be completing this remotely, don't assume that you're never going to have to go on camera. At least have something handy that you can throw on over yourself so that you appear professional on camera. Better safe than sorry, so just ask. And speaking of just asking, the next thing that I would recommend is to ask questions. A great way for them to evaluate whether you're understanding what you're seeing is by asking appropriate questions. That doesn't mean just ask, what's this, what's this, what's this, why do you do this? But ask some clarifying questions, or even show some interest in the company itself. If you're thinking this is maybe a place that you would like to be employed, start asking some of the employees there. How long have you been there? What do you like about working here? How do you find the management? And ask them a little bit about their background and where they've worked previously and how they found the transition over here, because that's a way to kind of indirectly find out if they were hired off an internship. And you can spark that conversation about yourself and where you're coming from with your schooling, and maybe they can kind of give you the insight if anyone from that school has also come through and been hired. And as you are asking questions, make sure you take notes. Don't just sit there and shadow and watch and not say anything. It's good not only to take notes because it shows that you're learning and you're absorbing and you're fascinated by what you're seeing, but also you want to have some takeaways to take back to class. If your instructor or someone at your school asks you how your internship or externship is going, you should have at least 3 key takeaways to give them. You don't want to be caught off guard by your teacher going, "Oh, how's your externship going?" And you're like, "It's okay." You want to have at least 3 things to tell them, like, "Oh, well, I got to see how a medical note is generated. I learned that a lot of people there were hired because they were temps to start out." So have a couple of key takeaways to discuss and bring back and share with the group. Now let's talk about some of the don'ts with your externship. And the biggest don't is to fall into that negativity or gossip that might be going on in that organization. It can be hard because people might say things to kind of provoke you or want to pull you in and be like, "Oh, you're this person and you're new and I'm going to have you kind of defend me and what I'm doing," and say that, "Oh yeah, everyone else is crazy." But try to be subjective and kind of neutral when it comes to some hot button issues. And try not to fall into the squabbles of this person and that person and they're just out to get me and she's not as good of a coder and they don't appreciate blah, 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 blah. Just don't get into it. The other thing not to do is don't just assume that you're going to wind up with a job out of this, but you can ask what would make you a good candidate for someone who would be interviewing for a position. Keep your eyes open. Ask if there's maybe a typical time of year when they post more positions, if something will be opening up soon. You will likely have to apply and be interviewed to be accepted for a position. The next big don't, and I know this seems kind of obvious, but it's worth saying, don't make copies of anything that has personal health or private information on it, or talk about personal health information or topics that you've seen. Like, don't go back to class and go, "Oh yeah, we had this gross case with this blah, 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 and this 26-year-old patient, etc." Any identifying information. Be very, very mindful of privacy laws and HIPAA. And even things like company information, be very careful about taking maybe proprietary information, company handbooks, etc., and taking them back to your class or your personal home without permission. And the last thing I'm going to recommend is don't just keep your mouth shut and your eyes down. I want you to be the intern that they compare all of the other interns to. You want the person who comes in after you to have to hear, "Oh, you're from such and such school? Oh, that's where Jody came from and she was the best intern we've ever had. So we know that you're going to be excellent too." You want to be that person, the person who sets that bar. Get to know all of the people, learn all of the tasks, all of the departments that you can. If they have you stuck somewhere for several days doing the same thing, don't be afraid to ask them, like, "Hey, is it possible I could shadow this or this or this or this?" Or, "Hey, I can help out with this and this and this and this. If you're shorthanded with payment posting, let me give it a try and see if I can help you out with some of that backlog." And I know that people that watch this channel want to be those shining stars. You're the person who's investing more time and you can be that shining star. Now, as far as where to find internships and externships, when you're picking a school, and if that's something you want, make sure you look out for that. But there are a couple of resources I can give you. One is Project Extern with the AAPC. So Project Extern helps pair medical coding students with externships. You can find it. I will link it in the comments below. That is only available though to AAPC members. And there are limited internships offered through OS2. Melissa Freeman, the queen, she does have some internships in risk adjustment that she offers to students. It is a fantastic program, could not recommend them enough. Now, if you need tips on the next step, which is interviews, I have a video that can help you out. You can get it right here. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, just keep on coding on.